Hello, welcome back to another drawing workshop. This week I decided I would do something a little bit tricky for many artists, and that is drawing hair, because I haven't really talked about that yet, I guess. And so I'm just going to kind of show you some tips because there's no one way to draw hair, obviously. There is a way of drawing hair that I feel at least is makes it more difficult than it needs to be. And a lot of people kind of start drawing hair that way, you know, when you're a little kid. Let's see, you'll usually have a head and you'll draw each individual strand and it ends up looking kind of messy and chaotic and overall kind of flat. So there are some artists who still kind of use this style, like in comics, things like that. So it's possible to do it, but like I said, there's not a whole lot of dimension to it, so it's a little bit more cartoony. So I'm going to say we're not going to look into that style. I'm going to show you another way. If this is kind of the way you draw hair, I'm going to show you another way to look at it. And that is looking at the overall shape of the hair, right? So I have some heads and I'm going to draw some different kinds of hair. And I think I'm going to start with a kind that I find at least to be the easiest, or it's the easiest to tweak when you have it. So, and that is kind of long flowing hair. So, okay. So I said we're going to look at shapes. So really, when drawing hair, I'm going to draw a big blocky shape. Right, okay. So as you can see, I've drawn a blob over this person's head. And I haven't done anything over the face, but you'll notice that I did leave a lot of space between the skull and the shape of the hair, because hair has volume, ideally. So we're doing that. So when you have kind of the shape blocked in, and I think I'm going to have some over their face a little bit, you might be able to find something like a part, or maybe like an origin on the skull where kind of most of the hair is flowing from. I like to find a single point that I can kind of work with. And then you can start dividing up your shape from there. So I'm going to have everything kind of flowing from the crown of this person's head. So as you can see, I kind of instinctively found some shapes, particularly around the face where it's been maybe pushed aside, or you know, maybe it's a little bit shorter, feathered or something. The shapes are going to be a little bit smaller. As you get down here, they might be a little bit bigger at first. So I found a couple shapes there, and then maybe this one is a larger chunk of hair. Then it comes down here. It's sort of where it, you know, curls. It's going to pinch together a little bit, so your shapes can intersect and overlap, and you'll have this sort of situation here. So it's also good to think of hair as maybe ribbons. So I'm showing you this little shape off here. Okay. So hair will clump together, so not often do you get strands that are just sort of going rogue on their own. Often it'll clump together, just kind of held together by surface tension or oils or what have you. So as you can see here, it kind of gives you this three-dimensional ribbon-like shape, and then you can draw in like little bits of hair. So this is a good way to draw like curls, coils, stuff like that. And I've kind of used that right here where it all sort of pinches together. And then when adding dimension to the hair, you'll see this little area back here is going to be behind this person's ear. So that's going to be kind of behind the fall of the rest of their hair. So for right now, I'm just going to shade it in. And that's another thing you're going to do if you're really going to try to like render the hair fully with a pencil, is you're going to find the points where the hair is going to be the darkest, like, and you're really going to kind of focus the shade on those points. Same here. So on the other side, there's probably going to be some strands of hair that stand out, but then you'll also have probably a dark point here. So kind of the hair that's in the back, you're kind of looking into a little cave of hair, you can go ahead and shade that. Okay, and then I've decided that this side of their hair is going to be kind of behind their ear. Okay, so you have these big kind of chunky shapes, and then when you have those, you can start pulling out smaller ones, and the hair is going to flow a bit more water-like, I guess. So as you can see, I'm making these kind of long shapes that sort of all point in the same direction, and occasionally one will be darker than the others because some are overlapping. So you have something kind of like that. And then you can start filling it in, and I like to not fill it in all the way. Kind of one of the important things about hair is finding like the highlights on it. So as you can see, my shadows are really dark where it kind of comes together, pinches together behind this person's ear, and then it spreads out like that. So at the points of these shapes, it's going to be darker, right? And then you can feather out these little strands that kind of show you where the hair is going. So as you draw it, it might sort of you might find other shapes that you kind of want to push and pull, or you might want to erase some highlights, like in here if I didn't think it was highlighted enough. Just do a little band of highlight through it, and you're back in business. So this works really well especially for dark hair. If you want to do lighter hair, I'd say just sort of ease up on the lines that I'm doing now, the ones that kind of come through the hair, and just focus on the really dark points, because even when someone has blonde hair, when you pinch it together, it will be darker. It's just how hair works. And so now I have a lot of detail in here, and I don't want to get it too messy, so in this section that kind of swoops around the side here, I'm going to kind of clump this all together. So I'm not going to do too many additional strands in this section because this is a little bit less in focus in the front of this person's head. So I'm going to do the shading, and so this whole section here is kind of one mass of hair. And then, there you go. And then kind of as you see that you need it, you can add more shapes. And then coming around here in these bigger sections of hair where their hair kind of gets loopy, I'm going to do that. Okay. I just gouged a hole in my paper. Cool. All right. So that is kind of one way to do hair. And when you're kind of done getting the main shapes in, well, okay, not quite bedhead, but you can add these kind of extra hairs that stick out. It'll make it look more realistic, a little bit maybe messier, especially kind of over the face. It can look pretty. So that's one way to do hair. That is an easy way to do like longer hair, and you can kind of take these same principles and apply it to shorter hair. So I'll show you shorter hair here. A lot of times when you're first doing hair, it's good to get the hairline in first so you kind of know where you're going. A lot of them could be kind of round across the forehead. I think like typically when you're looking at like women's hairstyles, the hairline will be kind of round. It can also be a little like widow's peak or a swoop like that in the front. And the only difference I find, like men, I guess, have like this little jagged bit here that kind of is level with the eyebrows. I think some women do too, but for the shorter styles, I kind of like to include that just because it looks good. Okay. So I'm going to do a shorter style here, like I said, and I'm going to get in the shape of the hair. Going to have faux hawk, sure. Okay. So on the longer bits, I would probably do the same thing. So you have kind of these sections of hair. You see the direction the hair is flowing. It's all kind of combed up towards the center here. And you can kind of see, you know, it's growing from this part that I've drawn in there. So this is where the hair gets shorter down here. So you can do that. Your hair there. And then for shorter hair, I don't have a great technique other than sort of cross-hatching, I guess, and then you can gradually fade it down to just shading if it's really short. But cross-hatching will at least give you a little bit of dimension without having to like draw in, you know, specific strands and stuff. It'll still give you parts where there's darker, you know, and lighter, and gives the impression of hair. So there we go there. And then again, you can draw in kind of the stray strands unless he's got a lot of mousse on there. There we go. Incidentally, a lot of people ask me when I'm doing here kind of how beards go. I don't know, but usually like this, usually like go down to meet the nose, come down a little bit, and then meet the sideburn on the side there. And then you have the lips in there. And then down here, I think it usually comes up under the bottom lip a little bit. So if you're wanting to draw a beard, I think that's the general shape you want. You want this kind of like point here, and then a little point there. That's in profile, but yeah. Nice side note. All right. For drawing textured hair, again, we're going to do what we did over here and start with a general shape. That's pretty cool. I like that. Let's do a shaped portion too. That's awesome. All right. So we have like this shaped portion here that I'm going to do kind of cross hatches in, and then we have this sort of bigger section there. Okay. And so for textured hair, what I do is I curve, I rough up that outline a little to start. And you can add kind of pieces that stand out. And then back in here, like up here, this is kind of behind this person's head, so I'm going to shade it in first, pretty dark. All right, gonna erase the head a little bit in there. Okay, and then also here, add a little bit of texture in there. And then inside the shape, you can add texture and shade it first so it's darker. And then kind of shade it as one shape after that. So you have these darker bits that stand out because they're bits of like overlapping hair of texture in there. And then when you shade over the top, they should get darker, and then you have an overall shade. So I'm going to do a couple layers of shadow like that. So you see I have a highlight kind of developing there. But if you want dark hair, then you'll shade again over the top of that. So you have the impression of dark hair, but there's no like super bright highlight on it at this point. And if you wanted to, you can always pull out a highlight with your eraser. I can talk. Like so. There we go. Yeah. So it's really all about finding a shape that the hair takes first, and then kind of working down, adding details inside of that shape. And so then you can work on it a while. It really kind of depends on how much detail you want to put in it. And hair is one of those things that just you can keep adding detail and taking it away and erasing your highlights, and it'll just kind of keep developing until you like what you're left with. All right. And then just real briefly, I did mention like doing blonde hair, so I think, to be fair, I think I will go ahead and try to do some blonde hair. We'll do like super platinum blonde, so there's really not going to be a whole lot of shadows. All right, let's see. Okay, so there I have the shape. Gonna come across their face like that. And I'm not going to see either ear. Okay, so it's important to start with a pretty empty shape. So we're going to erase the head shape within. That hairline is way too low. It's going to be disguising all of their face hair. Okay, that's better. Okay, so you're doing the same thing as before. Is kind of finding the shapes in there and finding that point of origin. But you don't have to draw like all of the shapes that I did in here. They're more obvious here because the hair is darker, and where it clumps together you see points. But with like really light hair, you won't see the entirety of a lot of those shapes because they aren't completely dark. And even back here, your shadows will be lighter. And you can kind of show just where hair is maybe curving over the shape of the head. So like in here, I've drawn kind of a really fine shadow. So almost your shadows are taking on the function of the highlights here. So about the percentage of the hair that's highlight here will be shadow here. And this is a very kind of comic book way to do it, but it is a way to do it. So that's why I'm showing you. Okay. And then right here, so the highlights on this hair, since this hair is so light and reflective, are really big, and the shadows are very small. So that's really all I'm kind of showing you here, is to adjust the ratio of highlights and shadow for different tones of hair. And so really that's kind of all I have to do there. You can still do kind of your light stray hairs there. Sure. Don't go too crazy with them because the flyaways on a really platinum blonde person would be light, would be white. So you might see them like in the sunlight really lighting up. So if you had like a dark background, you could actually just erase for those flyaway hairs, and that would look about right. So there we go. So those are some techniques to draw hair. Obviously, as I said, those are not the only techniques to draw hair, but there's some of them. And I didn't even really get into hairstyles here like braids or anything like that. I can always do another video on those. I think this is enough to kind of get started on a lot of hairstyles. So hopefully you learned something. And yeah, if you like this video, just feel free to subscribe to the Weston Public Library's YouTube channel and click the bell for updates, and I will see you next week. Bye!